It was just another ordinary afternoon in New York. The city was bathed in a soft sunlight that made everything seem peaceful. I was sitting at a coffee shop in the park with Alex, my best friend since childhood. We grew up together in Brooklyn, and our lives were always intertwined, from high school to college and even our first jobs. He was more than a brother to me. "You know, this is my dream job," Alex said, his face alight with excitement. "I get to stay in the city, and I'll still be close to my best friend." I smiled and put my hand on his shoulder. "I'm so happy for you, man." That day is so vivid in my memory because it was the last normal conversation I ever had with Alex. Everything changed the next day. Alex just vanished. His apartment door was unlocked, all his belongings were in place, but his phone was off. I tried calling him over and over, but got no answer. His family had no news either. We all worried sick. The police were notified, but they found no leads. A week passed, and there was still no sign of Alex. My mind was in a constant state of turmoil. I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was seeing him again, just once. Then, the next day, the police called. They had found Alex. I rushed to the address they gave me. I'll never forget what I saw. Alex's lifeless body was in the basement of an old abandoned house. There were no signs of physical injury, but his eyes were frozen in a state of sheer terror. The police told me the cause of death was unknown. The autopsy showed no poison or any other unusual substance in his system. It was as if he had died from fear alone. After Alex's funeral, I went to his apartment to help his family pack some of his things. Everything was as he had left it, except for his laptop. On the desktop, a strange notepad file was open, titled Lucy. Curiosity overriding my fear, I opened the file. There was no text, just a single audio clip. I put on my headphones and pressed play. For the first few seconds, there was only a low whistling sound. Then came Alex's terrified voice. "Lucy. She's following me. She's looking at me. Into my eyes. She's..." The audio cut off abruptly. The sound of Alex's terror made my chest ache. For a moment, it felt like I was right there with him. My hands and feet went cold. I immediately closed the laptop. The next day, the same thing happened at my own place. On my laptop's desktop, that same Lucy file appeared. My hands were shaking, but I played the audio again. The same whistling, the same terrified plea from Alex. But this time something new happened. As the clip ended, I heard a faint whisper right next to my ear. It was a soft voice, but I heard it clearly. "She's looking at you too." A cold dread shot through me. I whipped my head around, but no one was there. I stood up, feeling as if someone was standing right in front of me. Yet I could see nothing. The experience left a deep mark on my mind, pushing me to the brink of insanity. Was I imagining things, or was there a real connection between this and Alex's death? These questions tormented me. The next few days were a waking nightmare. Sleep was impossible. I brought Alex's laptop to my place, hoping to find more clues. But every time I opened it, the whistling and Alex's scream echoed in my ears, followed by that horrifying whisper, "She's looking at you too." Part of me tried to rationalize it all, telling myself I was just hallucinating from grief. But the feeling was too real to ignore. It was a tangible fear that gnawed at my sanity. I tried to delete the Lucy file, but a message would always pop up. "Permission denied. File is being used by another program." But no other programs were running. Terrified and desperate, I went to my friend Jonathan, a cybersecurity expert. He listened to my story with a mix of disbelief and concern. He took the laptop and ran every diagnostic he could, but found nothing. "I don't get it," he said. "This file isn't ordinary. It's like it has no real physical existence on the hard drive." Jonathan suggested, "Was Alex working on any secret projects? Anything unusual from the past?" "No," I replied. "He was excited about his new job, but I don't know about any old projects." He then said, "I can try a special decoding software on the file. It might take a while." The next day, Jonathan called me, sounding shaken. "I found something," he said. "There was a hidden folder inside the file. It's called Alice." My blood ran cold. Alice? I remembered Alex had kept a secret diary he called Alice, where he wrote down his deepest secrets and strangest experiences. I knew he had it, but he never let me read it. "The folder has some weird pictures and audio clips," Jonathan continued. "The pictures are strange. They all have a faint, almost invisible face in the background. The audio clips are recordings of Alex himself, speaking very slowly." My heart pounded. I asked him to send them to me. The first clip I played had Alex's voice. "Alice, I know you're with me. I know you found me. I'm not afraid anymore. I know you won't hurt me." In the second clip, his voice trembled. "I know you're with me. I can feel your presence. You're playing a game with me. What kind of game is this?" The third clip was full of terror. "You can see me. You're staring at me. You're staring into my eyes. You're looking into my eyes." The fourth clip ended in a broken, desperate cry. "Lucy, she's following me. She's looking at me. Into my eyes. She's..." My head spun. Alex was recording his diary entries. He mentioned a game. Who, or what, was Lucy? I opened my laptop again. The Lucy file was still there. I knew it held the answers. I opened it and found a new audio clip. I played it. The same whistling, followed by a chilling chorus of whispering voices. "Lucy, she has come to us. She has killed Alex. Now she's looking at you. She has found you. Be careful." The audio ended. My mind was reeling. I found Alex's physical diary and flipped it open. On the first page it said, "Lucy, I know you're with me." And on another page, a disturbing drawing of a girl with deep black holes for eyes. Below it was written, "Lucy, she is watching me." I took a picture of the drawing and sent it to Jonathan. He called me back immediately, sounding terrified. "This isn't just a drawing, Sujin," he said. "It's an ancient symbol of an American demon called Lucy. It feeds on fear. It has no physical form. It can only make you see its image. And it harvests your fear by staring into your eyes." "So, Alex was a victim of this demon?" I asked. "Probably," Jonathan said. "But why him?" I knew we had to find out. Jonathan and I went back to Alex's apartment and scoured his diary for clues. We were looking for the game he mentioned. The final pages of the diary were filled with frantic, shaky handwriting. "Lucy is controlling every part of my life. What I see, what I hear, what I do, she controls it all. I can't separate my existence from hers. I'm just her puppet." On another page, Alex had scribbled, "She's forcing me to play a game. She's reminding me of my worst mistake. She says I've already lost to her." My heart hammered against my ribs. What was this mistake? And how could he have lost to a demon? The diary ended with a terrifying drawing of a puppet with its strings severed. Beneath it, the words, "The game is over." I suddenly remembered a childhood incident. When we were in high school, Alex and I explored an old abandoned house. Inside, we found a doll named Lucy. Alex was fascinated by it and insisted on taking it home. He would spend hours talking to it. I had always dismissed it as a strange habit. Could this doll have been the key? Jonathan and I decided to go back to that abandoned house one last time. We drove through the night, a silent dread hanging in the air. The house was exactly as I remembered, dark and eerie. Inside, the walls were covered in disturbing drawings, and human-like dolls hung from the ceiling. We found a single open door. Inside was a room filled with dolls, and in the center sat a large, unsettling doll whose face was a mirror image of the one Alex had drawn. Its eyes seemed to beckon me forward. I felt an invisible pull towards it. Jonathan called out, "Don't go near it, Sujan." But his voice felt miles away. As I got closer, I felt a wave of cold rush over me. I saw a flash of Alex's memory, as if it were my own. I saw him in this very room talking to the doll. "Lucy, I know you're with me." I stumbled back, horrified. My mind screamed at me. Was this just a memory, or was I now a part of the demon's game? My focus shifted, and I noticed a piece of paper lying next to the doll. It was a handwritten note from Alex. "The game is simple," it read. "The one who is the most afraid loses, and the one who loses becomes her puppet." I felt a chilling presence beside me. I slowly turned my head, but there was nothing. Yet I saw my own reflection in the doll's black, hollow eyes. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. It felt as if I was standing right in front of Alex in that final moment. The cold was unbearable. I looked around, but there were no other dolls, no other reflections, just the cold, empty room. Jonathan grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the house. We drove away as fast as we could, leaving the horror behind. Back at my place, I opened my laptop. The Lucy file was still there. I tried to delete it one last time, and to my surprise, it vanished. It was gone. Jonathan looked at me, perplexed. Why now? Why did it delete now? A horrible thought dawned on me. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. The file had vanished because it had served its purpose with Alex. Now it had found a new host. Alex wasn't just a victim. He was a player in a horrifying game he couldn't win. He had died not from a demon's physical touch, but from the unbearable fear it had fed him. The Lucy file and the Alice diary were just instruments of a psychological terror that transcended reality. The demon, the puppet master, had found its new puppet. And as I stared at my reflection on the now empty desktop, a cold shiver ran down my spine. The game had just moved to me. The bond between Alif and me was the kind you see in old movies, unbreakable, forged in the fires of a shared childhood. We grew up a few houses apart in a quiet American suburb, with a secret clubhouse in the woods and an endless playlist of classic rock. Our third best friend, Riaz, was the calm center of our chaotic universe. The three of us were a tripod, stable, and complete. We had just finished our sophomore year of college, and a summer road trip felt like the perfect way to celebrate. The accident happened on a long, empty stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere. It was a clear, cool evening. Riaz was in the back, asleep. Alif was driving, and I was in the passenger seat scrolling through songs. The last thing I remember was the screech of tires. A deer had darted out onto the road. Alif swerved, but it was too late. The car spun, hitting the guardrail with a sickening crunch. The world went black for a few seconds. When I came to, I was in a daze, my head throbbing. Alif was slumped over the steering wheel, unconscious but breathing. I looked behind me. The back window was shattered, and Riaz wasn't moving. There was no sound, no ambulance, just the mangled wreck of a car and the quiet hum of the night. The next few weeks were a blur of hospital lights and somber faces. Alif woke up a few days later, dazed but physically unharmed. Riaz's funeral was a nightmare. We stood side by side, two broken halves of a whole, watching our friend's casket being lowered into the ground. One night, a few days after the funeral, Alif and I were sitting in my living room, the silence between us heavy and unbearable. I looked at him, searching for the old Alif, the one who would crack a joke to fill the quiet. But his eyes were distant, a vacant look I'd never seen before. He suddenly turned to me. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice flat. My blood ran cold. "Alif, it's me, Sadiq." He just stared at me, his gaze unchanging. "No," he said, shaking his head slightly. "You're not him. You look like him, but you're not Sadiq. Where is he?" I felt a shiver run down my spine. The old Alif was gone. In his place was a stranger wearing his face, looking at me as if I were a ghost. The silence that followed Alif's question was heavier than the silence after the crash. For a moment I tried to convince myself it was a side effect of the trauma, maybe a temporary confusion. But his eyes held no trace of recognition. He just stared at me, his gaze unblinking. I tried to reach for his hand, but he flinched away, his body stiff. "Who are you?" he repeated, his voice now a low whisper. "Where did you come from?" I spent the rest of the night talking to him, trying to bring him back. I reminded him of our childhood, of the clubhouse in the woods, of our stupid high school band. I even sang the chorus of our favorite classic rock song. He listened, his head tilted, his expression unchanging. Then he looked at the coffee table between us. "That's not what he'd do," he said. "He'd be drawing on the coaster." I froze. It was a stupid, small detail, but he was right. Alex always drew small, intricate patterns on whatever was in front of him. I hadn't even noticed. Over the next few days, Alif's behavior became more erratic. He'd call me Sadiq one minute, and then look at me with fear and disgust the next, demanding I tell him what I'd done with his best friend. He would spend hours alone in his room, not eating, not sleeping. When I'd try to get him to talk, he'd whisper things to himself, as if communicating with someone else. "He's telling me not to trust you," he'd mutter, his eyes darting to an empty corner of the room. "He says you're a lie." My own sanity started to fray. I called his parents, our college counselor, even the police, but no one could help. They all said the same thing. It was post-traumatic stress. Alif was grieving, and the mind had its own way of coping. But I knew this was more than just grief. One evening, I found him in the living room, sitting on the floor, staring at a static-filled TV screen. The television wasn't plugged in. He looked up at me, his face pale and serious. "Riaz is here," he said, his voice barely audible. "He's telling me you're a fraud. He says you're not from here." I felt a genuine physical fear for the first time. It was one thing for Alif to be delusional, but this was a terrifying step into the unknown. I tried to tell him that Riaz was gone, that he was imagining things, but he just shook his head, a chilling certainty in his eyes. "He's showing me what happened that night," Alif said. "He says you were the one who swerved. He says he died because of you." I felt the blood drain from my face. My mind flashed back to the moment of the crash, the screech of tires, the violent swerve. The memory was a chaotic blur. I had no idea who swerved, me or Alif. But Alif looked at me with a chilling clarity. It was as if he knew something I didn't, as if he had been shown a truth that only he could see, a truth that was slowly, terrifyingly, driving him to hate me. Alif's words hung in the air, cold and heavy. "He says you were the one who swerved." My mind screamed in protest, but a part of me, a small, terrified voice, wondered if it was true. I couldn't remember. The memory of the crash was a chaotic blur of metal and glass. My own mind was a blank slate where that moment should have been. "Alif," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to get you help. You're not well. This isn't real." He didn't move. He just stared at the static-filled TV, a slight, almost imperceptible smile on his face. "Riaz is showing me things now. He says the fake Sadiq is the one who took his life." I left his apartment that night, not because I was mad, but because I was afraid. I didn't recognize the person sitting on that floor. He was a stranger wearing my best friend's face. The fear was a living thing, crawling under my skin. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Alif's empty gaze. Over the next few weeks, Alif stopped answering my calls. I'd go to his apartment, but he wouldn't open the door. He'd just yell from behind it, "Go away, you're not him. The real Sadiq is telling me what to do." The messages became more sinister. One night I got a text from Alif. It was a picture of a single silver kitchen knife on a black table. The caption was just one word: "Purify." My hands trembled as I read it. I knew what he meant. He was being instructed to purify his world of my presence. The man I had known my whole life, the one who would never hurt a fly, was now talking about murder. I went to his parents, but they just saw a grieving son with a wild imagination. I told them about the texts, but Alif's mother showed me his phone. There were no such messages. My phone, however, showed them clearly. It was as if I was the only one in the world seeing Alif's escalating madness. Was I the one going crazy? Desperate, I tried to find a logical explanation. I started researching the psychological effects of extreme trauma. I read about Capgras syndrome, a rare disorder where a person believes a loved one has been replaced by an identical imposter. It fit Alif's behavior perfectly. I clung to this idea like a life raft in a storm. It had to be a psychological condition, not whatever I was starting to believe it was. One afternoon, I drove to Alif's place. The door was unlocked. The silence in the apartment was deafening. I called his name, but there was no answer. I walked through the living room, into the kitchen, and stopped dead in my tracks. The kitchen table was covered in strange homemade symbols drawn with a black marker. In the center, there was a small, dusty radio. It was turned off, but a faint, high-pitched static was coming from its speaker. I leaned in, and I could just make out a faint, distorted whisper within the noise. It sounded like a voice, but not a human one. It was low, guttural, and terrifying. Suddenly, a voice spoke from behind me. "He's telling me what to do now." I spun around. Alif was standing in the doorway. He was holding the silver knife from the text message. His eyes were no longer vacant. They were filled with a cold, terrifying certainty. "He says you're a monster," he said, his voice flat. "And he says I have to kill you." Alif stood in the doorway, the silver knife glinting in the dim kitchen light. His eyes were cold, unblinking, a terrifying mask of certainty on the face of the person I had known my entire life. "He says you're a monster," he repeated, his voice devoid of any emotion. "And he says I have to kill you." My mind raced. This wasn't Alif. This was something else, some fractured, terrifying echo of my friend. I slowly backed away, my eyes locked on the knife, my hand reaching behind me for anything I could grab. "Alif, please. It's me, Sadiq. We're best friends. What happened to us?" He didn't respond to the words. He took a step forward, then another, his movements unnervingly deliberate. "He's showing me what you did," Alif said, his voice a low, chilling whisper. "He's telling me the real Sadiq died in the accident, and you took his place." He lunged. I threw my body to the side, stumbling into the living room, knocking over a lamp. Alif followed, his eyes fixed, a singular, terrifying purpose driving him. The knife flashed, narrowly missing my arm. I scrambled away, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. My gaze darted around the room, landing on the radio sitting on the coffee table. The high-pitched static was still humming faintly from its speaker. "You've been listening to him," I gasped, pointing at the radio. "That's not Riaz. That's something else." Alif just smiled, a vacant, unsettling smile. "He sends me messages," he said, holding the knife up. "He tells me the truth." I knew I had to get out, but I couldn't just leave him here. I saw my chance when he took a moment to look at the radio again. I lunged forward, not at him, but at the device. I grabbed the radio and ran for the door, not looking back. I heard him scream my name behind me, a raw, guttural sound that wasn't his voice. It was the voice of pure rage, of something that was trapped, furious, and hunting me. I sprinted down the stairs and out into the night, the radio clutched in my hand. I got into my car and sped away, the tires screeching on the asphalt. The image of his eyes seared into my mind. I drove for miles, not knowing where I was going, until I was far away from his street. I pulled over on a dark, empty road and took a shaky breath. I looked at the radio on the passenger seat, its static humming softly in the silence. It was just a device, a tool. But what was it connected to? What was sending those messages? I turned it on, fidgeting with the dial, trying to find the exact frequency again. I found it. The static was there, but it was stronger now. I put my ear close to the speaker, trying to make out the whisper. This time I heard a different voice. It was softer, more garbled. It sounded familiar. I strained to listen, and then I heard it. The voice was repeating a single horrifying phrase over and over again in a chillingly distorted tone. It was my own voice. "I can see you. I can see you," it whispered. I threw the radio to the floor, my stomach lurching. The voice was mine. It wasn't just Alif's delusion. It wasn't just a mysterious signal. The voice was coming from inside the car, inside the radio, and it was speaking to me, through my best friend. The horror wasn't just that Alif was a monster, the horror was that I was too. I sat in my car on that empty road, the radio humming on the seat beside me. The voice was mine. "I can see you," it had said. But that wasn't right. My own voice wouldn't say that. It would say something else. It would say... I picked up the radio, my hands shaking, and turned the dial again. I found the frequency and put my ear to the speaker. The static returned, but it was different now. The whispers were clearer, more desperate, and I could finally make them out. "It wasn't me, Alif." My voice whimpered. "He took my place. He's in my body." My world came crashing down. The pieces of the nightmare suddenly fit together in a horrifying puzzle. The accident, Riaz's death, Alif's paranoia, the messages. It wasn't Alif who was the monster. It was me. I remembered the chaos of the crash, the blinding flash of light, the sickening crunch of metal. I remembered feeling a violent tug, a sensation of being ripped from one place and shoved into another. When I woke up, I was in Sadiq's body, but I wasn't Sadiq. I was the survivor of the crash, a ghost who had found a new host. The real Sadiq. He was gone. He was the one trying to reach Alif, trying to warn his best friend from beyond the grave. The radio wasn't a supernatural device. It was just a simple radio, a tool that a tormented soul was using to speak to the living. I looked at my hands, my arms, my reflection in the rearview mirror. This was Sadiq's body, his face, his life. But inside, I was a terrified consciousness that had no right to be here. Alif wasn't crazy. He had seen the truth all along. He had seen a monster wearing his best friend's face, all of his paranoia, all of his fear, all of his accusations. They were for a ghost that had stolen his best friend's life. I looked at the radio one last time. The whispers had stopped. The channel was dead. The real Sadiq was gone, his last plea unheard. I was alone, forever trapped in a body that wasn't mine, haunted by a truth that only my best friend and I knew. The horror was not that I had lost my best friend. The horror was that I had become the monster my best friend was so desperately trying to escape. I had survived the crash, but I had lost everything. And the most terrifying part of all was knowing that, from this moment on, I would have to live the rest of my life as a ghost in my own skin. It was a cold, rainy night in Seattle, the kind of night that just begged you to stay inside and do nothing. My best friend, Rick, was sprawled across my couch, a bag of chips precariously balanced on his chest. We had been friends since high school, a bond forged over late-night study sessions, bad pizza, and a shared love for old-school video games. "Dude, I'm bored out of my mind," Rick groaned, tossing a chip into his mouth. "We've played every game we own like 3 times. There's nothing new." I was about to agree when I saw it. An ad on my phone for a retro video game store, a small hole-in-the-wall place I had never heard of before. Curiosity got the best of me. "Hold up," I said, grabbing my keys. "I think I know a place." The store was a dusty, cluttered mess, but it was a gamer's paradise. I was about to give up on finding anything interesting when a small cardboard box tucked away on a top shelf caught my eye. Inside was a single unmarked CD. The label was completely blank. "What is that?" Rick asked, his voice low with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. I shrugged, a grin spreading across my face. "I don't know. I said, pulling out my wallet, "but I'm about to find out." The old man behind the counter, his eyes twinkling with a strange amusement, took the CD and gave it a quick look. "This one's a classic," he said, handing it back to me. "But you might want to be careful. They say some games are best left in the past." I didn't think much of his warning. We rushed home, eager to play this mysterious new game. We popped the CD into my old desktop computer, and the screen flashed with a title that sent a chill down my spine: Midnight Friends. The game loaded up with a strange pixelated image of two figures, one taller than the other, standing on a dark, rainy street. It was a mirror image of me and Rick. "Whoa, that's weird," Rick said, leaning forward. We started playing. The game was a simple text-based adventure, but the dialogue was oddly specific. The characters in the game, a duo who looked exactly like us, would talk about things that were eerily similar to our own lives. They would mention a shared memory of a high school band we had, and they would talk about our favorite pizza place. It was unsettling. But the real horror began when the game started talking about things that only Rick and I knew. The game's characters began to discuss a secret promise we had made a long time ago, a promise we had never spoken of again. The game knew our secrets. It knew our fears. It was as if the game was alive, watching us, listening to our every word. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. I looked at Rick. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. We had found a game that knew our every secret, and I had a feeling that the game was just getting started. I looked at the screen, and the words, "Welcome Players," seemed to glow with a menacing light. I had a terrible feeling that we were about to learn some things about ourselves that were best left in the dark. The initial shock of the game, knowing our secrets, quickly gave way to a strange mix of fascination and dread. The screen in front of us felt like a living entity, its pixelated characters our digital puppeteers. We couldn't stop playing. We were hooked, but not in a good way. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, unable to look away. "How in the hell does it know about the treehouse?" Rick whispered, his eyes wide. The game had just shown a scene of two pixelated figures in a crude drawing of a treehouse, discussing a secret stash of comic books we had hidden there in the 4th grade. It was something we had completely forgotten about, a detail so trivial, yet so terrifyingly specific. The game responded with a new text box. "Secrets have a way of finding their way out." We played for hours, each new scene revealing another buried memory. The game didn't just know our shared past, it knew things we had kept from each other. At one point, a character in the game turned to the other and said, "You never told me you were the one who broke the window in Mr. Peterson's garage." Rick went pale. That was a secret he had kept from me for 15 years. He had always blamed the neighbor's kid. I stared at him, my heart a hammer against my ribs. The camaraderie we had shared for so long felt like a fragile glass, and the game was slowly, deliberately chipping away at it. "Dude, I was gonna tell you," he stammered, his eyes avoiding mine. "It just never came up." The game continued its psychological assault. It revealed my hidden regret about a girl I had a crush on in college, a girl Rick had dated. The game's character looked at Rick's character and said, "He never told you he wanted to ask you out before you did. He was too scared." I felt a hot flush of shame and embarrassment. It was true. I had never told Rick because I didn't want to ruin our friendship. But the game had no such reservations. The light from the computer screen was the only source of illumination in the room. The rain outside had stopped, and the silence was deafening. The only sound was the low hum of the computer and our ragged breathing. The friendship that had been a pillar of my life for so long was beginning to feel like a house of cards. The trust that had been the foundation of our bond was crumbling. "Danny, I swear I didn't know," Rick said, his voice a desperate whisper. "I wouldn't have done it if I had known." The game didn't let up. A new message appeared, and this one was even more chilling. "The truth is a tool. It can be used to build or it can be used to destroy. The choice is yours." The game wasn't just revealing our secrets. It was forcing us to confront them. It was forcing us to see the cracks in our friendship, cracks we had both ignored for years. The game was no longer a simple game. It was a dark mirror, reflecting our own hidden flaws and fears back at us. It was testing our loyalty, our trust, and our friendship. And I had a terrible feeling that we were about to fail the test. The game had just begun its descent into the depths of our minds, and I had no idea how we were going to survive. The silence in the room was now a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. The secrets the game had exposed were like jagged shards of glass, scattered between Rick and me. We sat there, motionless, the glow of the monitor the only light in the suffocating darkness. The unspoken betrayals hung in the air, a poisonous fog that had replaced the camaraderie we'd shared for so long. "I can explain," Rick finally said, his voice a strained whisper. "Explain what, Rick?" I shot back, the hurt and anger boiling over. "That you broke Mr. Peterson's window and let me take the blame? That you knew I had a crush on Stacy but you dated her anyway?" My words felt sharp and cruel, but they were the truth. I looked at him, searching his face for an answer, a sign that our friendship wasn't as fake as the game was making it out to be. But all I saw was a mix of shame and regret. The game, relentless and sadistic, didn't give us a moment to breathe. A new text box appeared. "This isn't about the past. It's about what you hide now." We both froze, a fresh wave of terror washing over us. What else did it know? What else were we hiding? The game knew things we didn't even know we knew. The screen flickered and a new scene appeared. It was a pixelated image of me, sitting alone in my car, talking to my phone. A text box read, "He never told you he almost moved to a different city for a job. He was scared you would feel abandoned." My blood ran cold. That was my biggest secret. A job offer I had gotten a few months ago, a chance to start over. I had turned it down, not just because I didn't want to leave my family, but because I was afraid of leaving Rick behind, of ending our friendship. But the game, in its cruel wisdom, had exposed it all. Rick's eyes widened. "Is that true, Danny?" he asked, his voice shaking. "You were going to move?" I couldn't speak. The lie felt like a concrete slab in my throat. I had thought I was protecting our friendship, but the game had shown me that I was only creating a chasm between us. The game then shifted its focus to Rick. A scene of him at a bar appeared, drinking alone, a text box reading, "He never told you he's been struggling with his drinking again. He was too ashamed." My heart sank. I had noticed he was a little off lately, but I had just chalked it up to stress. I hadn't pushed him. I had just let it go. We had always been there for each other, but lately, we hadn't. The game was showing us that our friendship wasn't as strong as we thought. The digital characters on the screen seemed to morph, their faces twisting into grotesque, monstrous forms. The pixelated world around them began to crack and splinter, and the words on the screen became a torrent of accusations, a stream of consciousness that exposed every lie, every hidden truth, every unspoken regret we had ever had. The game wasn't just exposing our secrets, it was using them to tear us apart. It was a poison, a silent assassin that had come to destroy the one thing that mattered most: our friendship. The digital accusations on the screen were now a hurricane of words, a torrent of our failures and secrets that felt like a physical assault. The pixelated characters of the game were gone, replaced by a single terrifying image, a distorted, glitching face that seemed to be a grotesque combination of both mine and Rick's. It was a monster of our own making, a living embodiment of our unspoken betrayals. "What is this?" Rick screamed, scrambling backward on the couch, his face a mask of terror. "What is this thing?" The face on the screen didn't answer with words, but with a new, horrifying message that pulsed in angry red letters. "You're not fighting a game. You're fighting each other." A cold dread settled over me. The game hadn't just exposed our secrets. It had weaponized them. It had turned our friendship into a battleground, and our hidden truths were the ammunition. The trust between us, once the bedrock of our bond, was now a fragile, shattered thing. I looked at Rick. The person I had considered my brother was now a stranger. The face on the screen seemed to mock me, its distorted features a silent accusation. My own face was a reflection in the glass of the screen, and I saw a man I barely recognized, a man filled with bitterness and regret. The screen flickered, and a new message appeared. The game ends when one of you is broken. The air in the room grew heavy and thick, and I could feel a cold presence in the room, something that wasn't there before. It was a living entity, feeding on our fear and mistrust. The game wasn't just on the screen anymore. It was in the room with us, a silent, malevolent force. "We have to stop this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I reached for the power button on the computer, but the moment my hand touched the tower, a jolt of electricity surged through me, sending me flying back against the wall. "Don't touch it!" Rick screamed, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and anger. He lunged for the computer, but a strange, disembodied force seemed to hold him back, its icy touch a silent threat. We were trapped. The game had us where it wanted us. It had stripped us of our secrets, our trust, and our ability to escape. The only way out was to face the horrifying truth. The game wasn't just a game. It was a dark, psychological experiment, designed to push us to our breaking point, to turn us against each other. The screen flickered again, and a new message appeared. "One of you will have to pay the price. One of you will have to lose." I looked at Rick. His face was a mix of terror and despair. We were at a crossroads. We could either let the game win, let it turn us against each other, or we could fight back. But how? We had no secrets left, no defenses. The only thing we had was our friendship, a friendship that was now hanging by a thread. I had a terrible feeling that this was the final test. A test of loyalty, a test of trust, a test that was about to cost us everything. The air crackled with a malevolent energy, thick with the weight of our exposed secrets and shattered trust. The grotesque, glitching face on the screen pulsed with an almost triumphant malice. Rick and I stood frozen, two strangers in a room that had once been our sanctuary, now a digital cage. The message: "One of you will have to pay the price. One of you will have to lose," echoed in my mind, a death knell for our friendship. "Rick," I managed, my voice hoarse. "This thing, it wants us to destroy each other." His eyes, red-rimmed and filled with a raw fear, met mine. The anger and resentment that had been building between us suddenly seemed insignificant, dwarfed by the sheer terror of the entity on the screen. "What do we do, Danny?" he whispered, his voice cracking. The glitching face on the monitor seemed to swell, filling the screen. A new, disembodied voice, distorted and guttural, filled the room. It was not a game character's voice, it was a cold alien sound that seemed to crawl into my very bones. "Your friendship is a lie. Your bond is weak. Prove me wrong." A sudden surge of heat radiated from the computer, and the entire room went dark. The screen flickered back on, but instead of the monster, it displayed a single, simple question, glowing in an eerie green. Who is to blame for the broken window? My heart pounded. This was it, the ultimate test. The game wanted us to turn on each other, to finally succumb to the accusations. I looked at Rick, memories flashing through my mind, the broken window, the blame I had taken, the guilt he had carried. It was a small, childish secret, but it was the first crack in our foundation, the first seed of mistrust. "It was me, Danny," Rick said, his voice barely audible. "I broke the window. I let you take the fall." He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry, I should have told you." My initial reaction was a surge of fresh anger, a feeling of betrayal that tasted bitter in my mouth. But then I remembered the times I had hidden things from him, the job offer, the unspoken jealousy. We had both been guilty of prioritizing self-preservation over honesty. The screen flickered, displaying another question. Who left for a job opportunity without telling their best friend? I took a deep breath. It was me, Rick, I confessed, the words burning on my tongue. I almost moved. I was scared to tell you, scared you'd feel abandoned. I was scared to lose our friendship. The room grew eerily quiet. The computer screen remained on, but the questions had stopped. The glitching face was gone. Instead, there was a simple, pixelated image of two figures, me and Rick, standing side by side, their hands clasped. It wasn't about blame, Rick said, his voice soft, as if understanding had finally dawned on him. It was about trust, or the lack of it. We let our fears get in the way, I replied, feeling a strange sense of catharsis. We let the game get inside our heads. Just as we started to feel a glimmer of hope, the screen went completely black. The computer shut down with a final, ominous click. The room was plunged into total darkness, save for the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the window. We sat there for a long time, in the echoing silence of the room. The terror of the game had subsided, replaced by a raw, profound understanding of our friendship. The game hadn't won. It hadn't broken us. It had, in its own twisted way, forced us to confront our deepest fears and insecurities, to peel back the layers of pretense and reveal the imperfect yet undeniably real bond between us. The next morning, the sun streamed through my window. Rick was still asleep on the couch, looking utterly drained. The computer sat on my desk, a harmless piece of electronics. The CD, Midnight Friends, was gone. There was no trace of the game, no proof of the terrifying night we had just endured. But the truth of what we had learned, the hard-won clarity about our friendship, was etched permanently into our hearts. We had faced our deepest fears, confronted our hidden secrets, and in doing so, we had rebuilt our friendship, stronger and more honest than ever before.